to the Art of Being Human. On the last segment, we talked about becoming an independent person and how critical that is and how that starts very, very early in life. I want to start off today by reading you a quote from an older child who is not learning to be independent, and I think it will strike you how odd this really is. But anyway, I've shortened the quote up because it's a little too long, but anyway, let me read this to you. I'm glad my parents are people who know what is best for us to do and know how to go about making us do it. There are many parents today who do not know how to handle their children. As a result of this, the children become too independent. It makes me proud and happy when I think about how my parents have protected me from becoming a juvenile delinquent. So I don't know if that bothers you, but it bothers me. She is so dependent upon her parents. Her parents make her decisions for her, and she thinks that's protecting her from becoming a juvenile delinquent. When you raise a child, you need to teach them to learn how to be independent because you're not always going to be there to make decisions for them. And so you need to be able to show them how to be independent. And also you need to realize that if a child is independent, that's not going to make him a criminal. I mean, I'm independent. I've never been to jail. I've never robbed a bank. As a child, I was never a juvenile delinquent, but my parents were good and allowed me to make decisions when I was ready to, and this child is not getting that opportunity. So what happens if a child does not individuate? They become very dependent on whoever their caregivers are, and sometimes that's the way the parents want it, because they want to have that control. But they're not always going to be there to exercise that control. I mean, sometimes they're going to pass on, and the child is going to have to fend for themselves. So parents do have the responsibility to help their children grow and be independent adults. And being independent does not mean that you're going to do bad things. In fact, you can do very creative things being independent. So I wanted to bring that up. Now, and also I want to bring up a couple of other things. Genetics plays a big part on who you end up by being and the kind of personality you have. Genetics plays a big role in it, and if I get a chance, I'll go into that. And another thing that plays a big role in it, believe it or not, is nutrition. If a child does not get the proper nutrition at the proper time, it's going to affect their personality development, their physical development, their moods, all kinds of things. And so we need to get into that too. So I just want to mention those things, and we'll get into them later. It's hard to overcome problems that started very young in life, but this is what we have to do. For a person who has grown up and they're not quite sure who they are yet, or they've lived their life because other people have directed them, they have to learn how to become independent. So I just wanted to mention those. Now let's get back to toddlerhood. Here's a definition of being a toddler. I thought it was kind of fun. Emotionally, a toddler is an emotionally unstable, pint-sized dictator with the uncanny ability to know exactly how far to push you towards utter insanity before reverting into a lovable creature. Does that sound like your toddler? Well, it would sound like a lot of people's toddlers, so let me move on from that. Toddlerhood, and some of this I've mentioned before, so I'm going to do a little review. Toddlerhood is about 15 months to about 2.5 years. The average age for walking is about 15 months. A lot of babies walk a lot sooner, I know that, so there is a lot of variation, but we say in the textbooks that 15 months is about the average age. But this is the age that's important in many ways. They develop their self-concept. They learn to master motor skills. They're moving better. They're grasping things. They're holding things. Their walking skills are better. And they become toilet trained. But boys become toilet trained later than girls do. Boys usually don't become toilet trained until 3, but girls get toilet trained earlier. Now, I brought in this book. All aboard the potty train. It has to do with toilet training. Now, I'm not exactly sure what they expect to do with this book because they show children how to sign. Now, we usually don't teach children how to sign if they can hear, but the young child this book has to be read to them because they don't have the reading or the verbal skills to read it themselves. But if they have a hearing problem, they may not hear you read it. So what's the purpose of it? I think for a child who has a hearing disorder, but they're not totally deaf and can hear something, that's a help. And it also teaches them how to sign. So I'm going to go through a little bit of it. I just found it interesting. All aboard the potty train. So they're teaching a child to use the toilet. And, okay, I'll show this to you. I'm going to read a little and then I have to show you. Otherwise, you don't know what I'm doing here. Squiggles is going potty. He needs to sit on the potty some more. What is the sign for more? In other words, if you're going to sign, what is the sign for more? And you pick up this little piece and tip it, and there is the boy, and he's making the sign for more. Does that make sense to you? And that's the way it is all through the book. So let me try another one. Suki sat on the potty some more. Now she's all done. What's the sign for all done? So this is Suki, and she's all done going to the bathroom. And but so she's all done. What is the sign for done? This is what this picture is. And you take this picture, you move there's a little thing you move, and in the back of it, the sign for all done. And you can see the position of the hands. So they're teaching a child to sign as well as to go to the bathroom. And as I said, if a child is deaf, they're not going to hear you read it. They can't read it themselves. So it must be for children where they're teaching them to sign almost like it's a second language for them, or a child who has some mild hearing loss, and the signing would be a help. Let's see. Sunshine is all done going potty. She remembered to wash her hands. What's the sign for wash? So you pick this up, and the sign for wash is right there. The way that he's holding his sign, the way he's holding his hands is a sign signal. At any rate, there's a group of them. It's not a very long. It only has 3 or 4 pages. You know, children's books the pages are very thick. And you don't have many pages, but you got to remember children's attention spans are extremely limited. That's just because of brain development. They can't concentrate for long periods of time. Also, they're going to be kind of rough with books, and so it'll last longer if the pages are thicker. But generally speaking, I like children's books. They have a point to them. They're interesting to look at. They're very colorful, and the color attracts children. I picked this up. I didn't realize it had signing in it. When I picked it up, I said, well, this is a book about potty training, and if a child looks at it, they understand potty training a little more. But it's a book in signing as well. So take it for what it's worth. Okay, now, with a toddler, they become explorers. All of the things around them they couldn't get to. They could see, but they couldn't get to because they couldn't crawl, or they couldn't walk. Now they can get to all of those things. So they can move, and they can go to things that they could only see before, and they get into things that they couldn't even get into before. So it becomes an adventure. And I want to mention once again the terrible twos. They say no, they're not going to obey their parents and all of that. But you've got to remember, as I said in the last segment, it's a way for them to determine that they are an individual person, and they're growing up to be an individual person, not just the appendage of another person. So the theme of development is gaining autonomy and becoming independent. And they become aware of themselves as people among other people. Before, they're center stage. I've heard it said that young babies and infants are selfish. I don't look at it that way. They cry and get attention, but there's no other way they can communicate. They can't walk, they can't talk, they can't signal with their hands, you know? And so what are they going to do? They're going to cry. That's what gets mom's attention, and that's what she needs to hear to know that the baby has a problem. And if she's a good parent, she's going to be keeping an eye on him anyway, and she's going to know when he needs to be moved, because remember, you lay your baby down on his side, or you lay your baby down on his back, whatever the doctor says, he can't even move his body to position it to a more comfortable position. He can't do it. He doesn't have the nervous skills to do it. He doesn't have the physical movement to be able to do it. A baby is born with everything it needs. It has the nerves, it has the brain, it has the organs, it has the legs. The head is a little larger because the brain needs that space. But nothing's working quite right. Nothing's in sync. Nothing's developed. Nothing's coordinated. All of that stuff takes time to do. And so the baby is really just a helpless little being that needs to have as much help as it needs to have, which is basically constant attention. They begin to master objects with their own body. They begin to walk. They begin to balance. But the balance is somewhat poor. Excuse me for one moment. A baby is going to vacillate between dependence and independence because they really are totally dependent, but they're getting to the point in toddlerhood where they think they should be independent, and that's the natural surge of things, and this is the way it has to be. So they want to explore everything. They want to get into everything. They want to put everything in their mouths. How come? In order to test anything else, all their lives they've been putting things in their mouth. They've been sucking on a bottle. They've been spoon-fed, you know, so everything goes into the mouth. So it's natural for them to think that to check anything out and see what it's like, it has to go into the mouth first. So you gradually have to teach them that some things don't go in your mouth, and they will learn that. They love to use their whole bodies. They throw themselves into a chair, and they offer themselves to be held by raising their hands. Usually raising their hands means pick me up. They have a very short attention span, and that's due to the development, their brain development and their nervous development. They can't concentrate long, and they engage in parallel play. Now, what is parallel play? It's when a child is playing beside another child who's also playing, but there's no interchange between them. They are doing individual play. They just happen to be doing it side by side. So this is parallel play. They're playing by themselves, even though they may be sitting right beside another person who's also playing. Now, I want to give you an example of this. I'm going to read something. This is a quote. This is a conversation between two young children. Jenny, the girl, and I'm assuming Chris is a boy, and this is what they say. They're playing together, but they're really not playing together. They're talking together, but they're really not talking together. So just listen to this. Jenny says they wiggle sideways when they kiss. Chris says, what? Jenny says, my bunny slippers. They are brown and red and sort of yellow and white, and they have eyes and ears and those noses that wiggle sideways when they kiss. Chris says, I have a piece of sugar in a red piece of paper. I'm going to eat it, but maybe it's for a horse. Jenny says, we bought them. My mommy did. We couldn't find the old ones. These are like the old ones. They were not in the trunk. That's what Jenny says. She's still talking about her slippers. Chris is saying, I can't eat this piece of sugar, not unless I take the paper off. Jenny says, and we found Mother Lamb. She was in Poughkeepsie in the trunk in some house in the woods where Mrs. Tiddlywink lives. Now remember, she doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality at this point. Chris said, do you like sugar? I do, and so do horses. Jenny says, I play with my bunnies. They are real. We play in the woods. They have eyes. We all go to the woods. My teddy bear and the bunnies and the duck to visit Mrs. Tiddlywink. We play and play. Chris says, I guess I'll eat my sugar at lunchtime. I can get more for the horses, and besides, I don't have a horse. Now, do you see what's happening here? She is talking about something that's completely different than what he's talking about, yet they are talking back and forth, but they're not making any sense because they're not talking to each other. They're basically talking and thinking that they're talking to each other, but they're responding in a very individual way. That's parallel play. Now, about this Miss Tiddlywink. Children do not know the difference between real life and fantasy. If a child is watching a movie and there's a dog in the picture, as far as he's concerned, the dog is inside the television set. They don't think of anything as being fantasy. Their brains can't conceive that there's a real world and there's an imaginary world. They can't conceive of it. It's just something that's beyond them at this point in their biological development. It's just not there. I have found that people who have slight retardation have the same problem. If they're watching a soap opera, they'll end up by screaming at the characters in a soap opera because they think it's real. They don't understand that it's just acting, it's just a story. They have real problems like that. Even children who are junior high sometimes have problems in understanding what is fact and what is reality. And they just can't quite figure it out because their brains aren't developed to the point where they can figure it out. And so you can tell them it's just a play, but to them it seems so real. With young children, you've got to watch them when they're watching television because they do think that what they're looking for, the puppy, the kitten, whatever, is actually inside the television set. And you don't want them to fool around with the back of the set or start pulling wires to reach in to get the kitten out. And some babies will do that. So you have to watch them carefully. And I'm really concerned about what kids watch on television anyway. I have a quote here if I can find it. Okay. 20 million children watch television for an average of about 5 hours each Saturday morning. What do they see? A typical 100 hours of viewing by youngsters portrays 12 murders, 17 gunfights, 21 persons being shot, 37 hand-to-hand fights, 21 acts of violence with a dangerous weapon, and 25 stabbings, clubbings, suicide, or rape. Do you really want your child watching that? And even cartoons are bad, some of them, because they're punching each other out, they're hitting each other on the head, they're chasing each other. You need to help and supervise what your children are watching because remember, they're bringing all of this stuff in their brain and it's making an imprint on their brain, and that's what they think is normal. And they're too young to know that this is just play acting. And they're too young to know that because one bunny hits another bunny with a board doesn't mean they can't hit their brother with a board. You know what I mean? They just take it in. They take it as it is. They think very concretely. Retarded children do the same thing. They think in terms of concrete things. Here's a table. Here's a chair. Here's a board. Here's a person. He's bothering me. I can hit him with the board. And they don't think in terms of morals, or this is wrong, or this is not how you handle things. They're much, much too young for that. So this is where the parent has to step in. No more watching cartoons in which one animal figure or character hurts another animal character. You know, you should not allow children to watch it. By the way, autistic children should not watch television at all. I think, and it's said, I've read that babies should not watch television for the first 2 years of their life because what they see, the fast images that they see, like if they watch a show in which the images change rapidly, it has an effect on the way that the brain grows, so I've read. So it's better for young children, ages, from birth up until about 2 years, not watch television at all. And autistic children get so hooked on TV that they can't manage their lives in terms of what's real and what's not real. It's a problem for them anyway, and they probably should not be allowed to watch television at all. So that's just some input that I've learned from the research that I've done. So anyway, they play in a parallel way. There is also solitary play where they just play alone. And they have the beginnings of dramatic play. Dramatic play is where they actually imitate their parents. They'll pick up a toy phone and they'll talk and blabber into the toy phone. So that's considered to be dramatic play. They're actually copying what their parents are doing. And they're also pretending to take care of, let's say they have a doll. They're pretending to take care of a younger brother or sister, but they're afraid if their mother is out of sight because she feels gone to them. They love things that move. They love tricycles. They love containers, putting things in, taking things out. They play more with containers than the toys that came in them. They love to splash water, play in the sand, use paper and pencil. They need to feel texture. That's important for their development as well. They imitate their mother. They basically are learning about life and about adult life. How do they learn how to behave as an adult? For one thing, they learn their parents. Their parents are their role models, so that's important to be a good role model. They become negativistic. They love the word no. They love to show off their independence. And they try to have control over others, like they are learning how to have control over physical objects. They're learning to control the ball. And so therefore they're trying to control people too. They get mixed up with that. And they have to be controlled so that they don't become tyrants. They now have to toilet train, and they have to learn control, and they can make a parent angry if they decide not to toilet train. So what they're beginning to do is they're beginning to learn that their behavior can affect and change the emotion of another person. That's an important thing for them to know. Our behavior can affect the way that another person feels, can affect the way another person shows emotion, and they are just learning that through simple things, but that's something that they need to know growing up. And so therefore, they have to learn to separate themselves from their parent and become independent. Parents need to use judgment. It takes a child time to recognize what they need to do and how they need to do it. And they have to use judgment and not come down too hard on a child because they're just learning and they're just growing. Their much early talk is requests. The parent says, come here, do this, do that. And the child may say no because they don't want to honor a request that their parents made because they're learning to be independent. So whatever your child is doing, put it in context of the life that they're living, the people around them, what they're growing, what they're learning to be, and their struggle for independence, which is a real struggle, but it's important. So they tend to talk about concrete things, the book, the table, the chair. They don't have any concept of more psychological things, such as democracy or love or things like that we can't really nail down. The ethereal things we can't nail down. They have no understanding of that. So everything is concrete thinking, but that's perfectly normal because of their age, because of their brain development. That's the way it has to be. They tend to generalize. All men are daddy to them. The baby sees a woman wearing a fur coat. You pick up the baby and he pats the collar, the fur coat, and he says, nice kitty, nice kitty. Everything that's fur is kitty. Everything that's male is daddy. And they confuse the meanings of words because they lack experience with words. They're just learning how to talk. So sometimes a toddler will regress and act younger than they are in order to get more attention attention from the parents if there is another baby involved. But that's what life is all about. You have to handle that. You have to let them know that they are a person in their own right and you love them, but they're not going to be like their baby brother or their baby sister because they're older now and they don't have to go back there. So it's a challenge to raise a young child, but you can see just from what I've said in the last two segments how important it is that the child get a very good start at a very early age to prevent problems from happening later. Now I'm going to close it here. We'll continue next time. Please join me then.